You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Have you heard? The We Deepen Podcast Network has a new show. The Elevate to Legendary podcast by Dr. Nikki is a journey to activate your fullest self-expression. Dr. Nikki interviews leaders who have transcended perceived limitations in order to make a meaningful impact. Guests share their stories to teach you how to optimize your body, brain, and spiritual connection to manifest a truly fantastic life. Be sure to search for Elevate to Legendary with Dr. Nikki in your podcast app or go to wedeepen.com/podcasts to subscribe now and listen later. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder of We Deepen, wedeepen.com. Go check out the calendar, see all of the social and transformational experiences that are happening in Miami, Los Angeles, all over. And we are going to continue curating more experiences. Actually, if you know any events that are helping people to have healthy, meaningful, loving relationships in your hometown, feel free to send them my way. You can go to the website, wedeepen.com. There's a contact form and submit your inquiries. Contact us. Tell us what you want to see and what you want to be a part of. So special today, I have just wrapped 3 days of RelateFest. I'm here in Miami. It was the inaugural RelateFest. I imagine if you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard me talk about it recently and the hype to get here. And we had over 100 people join this experience. These people are, as we said, are those who are endlessly curious about relationships. And this morning, I am sitting here with Derek Hart. Derek was the keynote speaker at RelateFest. He is a couples coach. And I feel like those two words, couples coach, don't necessarily encompass his work of 31 years. It's beyond coaching. He's rebuilding relationships or even reinventing relationships that were already existed. As a lot of you have heard too, or if you're curious about relationships, you know of Esther Perel. And she says at the end of her TED Talk, the one on cheating and mating in captivity, that to couples, that as this new information is revealed, kind of the authenticity and their reality has been shaken, they come back to get togetherness, that their old relationship has ended and a new relationship has begun. So I can see and have experienced in watching. Derek has a new documentary out. I've got to see some of that documentary and experiences work here at RelateFest and in many, many conversations, that he is essentially recreating the relationship that that couples have felt challenge or turmoil in. And, oftentimes when I was really focused on dating and singledom, couples would come to me and they would say, what are you going to do for us? Like, what about us? And they shared, there was actually a group of them at one point, they had shared that the things that were most being marketed to them for their relationships were either therapy or sex parties. And there are other modalities that you can access that can help to heighten and connect your relationship. So Derek, welcome to this podcast. This is your first on Deepen with Christina.
Hi, Christina. Nice to be here. Love talking with you all weekend so far.
Yay. And I want to start with how did you get into this work?
Oh, wow. About 31 years ago, I was in a relationship and I couldn't get out of it. I tried 7 times to get out of a relationship, and I just kept going back. And I did not understand why that was happening at all. So I went to a program. Many of you are familiar with 12-step programs like AA. I went to one called CODA, Codependence Anonymous, and I discovered immediately I had a really big problem. And I was needy. I didn't know what was happening in my relationship, and I kept going back. So after going to about 5 of these meetings, I actually kind of figured it out, and I got out of a relationship that really wasn't good for me. And I started going to these meetings every night for a long time, and I started sponsoring people. Like, most people, once again, know AA and being sponsored. I was sponsoring people that needed relationship help. And not only would I go to a 90-minute meeting every night, but night after night, I would then go to restaurants after and talk till 2 a.m. And I was determined to figure this thing out. How do people relate? How do they connect? What is really going on here? And 31 years, I just can't stop. I think it's the most important thing that we can learn.
I agree. We're going to be great friends and colleagues for some time because I am obsessed with relationships as well. Now, so you're in this relationship 31 years ago and you wanted it to end. And I imagine as couples come to you oftentimes to, do they stay together? Do they separate? When do you know? How does a couple know that they should break up or they should be together?
Yeah. One of the things I say when they first show up and they're actually asking that question, should we be together? I say, we have to figure out something here. Do you have an incompatibility problem or don't you? An incompatibility problem, if we take an extreme one, let's say somebody wants to sail the world and the other person wants to live on a farm. Okay, that's obviously a really big incompatibility. But couples usually don't actually have an incompatibility. What they have is communication that hasn't worked, often for years, sometimes for decades. So at the end of working with me, or let's say 8 to 10 hours into it, sometimes one partner does not want the kind of intimacy and does not have I don't know if they don't have the capability, but they don't go there. That's an incompatibility. If you want to actually be close and deep with a partner and the other partner is not ready for it, then we look at the main goal of coming to see me, which is to get closer as soon as possible or to break up as soon as possible. And couples that show up in this dilemma have sometimes been fighting for 8 years. So we want to break that and teach them the exact thing they need to know to make a decision on what to do next. That reminds me, I remember hearing before that each of us is our own individual vessel, and we all have different levels of capacity. Like some people are so super ambitious. I mean, they're ambitious enough that they want to build the biggest company in the world. Other people are more of, hey, I want to stay at home. I don't really like to socialize. I want to watch some Netflix. And so sometimes an individual has this huge vessel and they are aiming, like if we're cups, they're aiming to pour this into another, but the other one is full, or their cup is not that big. And so it's just overflowing. And then the other one's like, wait, what's happening? Why aren't you, going to, and you just use that word ready. Is it around being ready, or is it that we each are different levels and spectrums? Is sometimes you think of like maybe a plant medicine, maybe more work will open them up and they'll go deeper and deeper and deeper. But do some people, it's just not within this lifetime, their work to go that deep? Wow. It is the question of all questions. My job is to very much not sit in judgment of people or talk about the levels people are capable of. Usually, when someone seems that they are not at a certain level of communication, you know what? They've just been really, really hurt. So what is my task in that scenario? It's to slow things down so much that they can feel held and understood, quite possibly for the first time in their life. So what couples don't know is who their partner would be if they were part of bringing out the best in the other. They don't know that until it actually happens.
So if we rewind to how couples come together, because I think if your work could begin at the perfect timing, it may be around somebody, I know that you work with couples, but here I am currently single. And in going through the process of formulating a relationship, what could somebody do to set and I'll say container, if you haven't heard that word, but the container of your relationship? What could someone do to facilitate the relationship starting off in the best way possible?
Yeah. I would start with self-love. Go into Amazon, look up self-love, and make sure you're definitely familiar with all those things to love yourself. However, as soon as we get into a relationship, that magical thing happens where you're triggered. And there's almost nothing you can do about it. So ideally, being in a relationship, and if you were brilliant enough to come to see a marriage counselor in the first 3 weeks of your relationship because you've both had things from the past that snuck up, and tripped you up, that would be absolutely brilliant. So, read books on relationships and read the good ones, especially books like by Sue Johnson, books on, called Hold Me Tight, for example, books that actually say the real stuff that happens in a relationship, and try to see if you can make contact with what you've done in your history. Don't just go see a therapist. Don't just go see a counselor who tells you how great you are. That's not going to help at all. You want somebody who is really smart to help you understand the dynamics of your past relationships, and they can help bring out you admitting how you usually are. Because I guarantee you hide, you run away, or you blame, or you build up resentment. Something stays bottled up inside and does not get spoken, and both people are part of that, and you are part of that, and I am part of that. So learning as much as you can about that dynamic in yourself is just key.
So you mentioned when you work with couples, and I've heard you say this oftentimes throughout the weekend, you keep saying 8 hours, or it's like these significant moments of 8 hours into working together. And therapy is generally an hour once a week, maybe once every other week, maybe once a month. A lot of coaches too are generally 1 to 2 hours. When you say 8 hours, I am receiving that there is an immersive experience happening amongst two people. Is this accurate?
Okay, first thing about the 8 hours is mostly I mean 8 1-hour sessions, but couples sometimes fly in and do intensives with me. And if they do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours, we're not just playing around. We're actually getting to the underbelly, the heart of what they've been hurting about for years and years and years. The actual good news about when I say 8 hours is I'm talking about an insecure attachment turning into a secure attachment in those 8 hours. This is what I do. I hold the couple and show them how to do that. And a big part of it is often they just don't know. They've just not been shown that, the thing you're supposed to do is talk about how scared you are, how confused you are, how much you don't know what to do in the next moment. And I model that, and I show couples how to do that over and over and over. So what does it look like to actually become secure in a relationship? If they have somewhere between 3 and 5 actual bonding moments in front of me where they feel deeply how they've affected the other person, and the other person receives that and feels gotten, when they do that 3 to 5 times, and then in their life outside of working with me, they do that 10 to 12 times, counseling's over and they're reattached. It's amazing to watch. And I watch it every month.
So I could say that you're an attachment coach.
You could. That works. That fits. Absolutely.
Okay. So can you give, you gave this stat yesterday in the session that you led around 1 out of 400 couples go to therapy. I was really shocked to hear that 1 out of 400. And now sitting with that, I can see first off, where did that number come from? Because stats sometimes are all out in the world. If you happen to know where you heard that, I would love to hear that. And then also tell me a little bit about the profile of a couple that will generally show up or call you for a session.
Yeah. First on the stat, I went looking for that and there was nothing out there. And I set out about 3 to 4 years ago, I set out to figure out that stat myself. I figured out that stat. I went and looked in a city and I looked up how many marriage counselors there were. And I did look up licensed ones because those were much easier to find. And when I gathered that information, then I did a little more research on how much of their practices were actually couples. Then I looked at the population and how many relationships we have in our country. Then I calculated it, and I was like, wow, that's about 1 in 400. So I came up with that. You won't find that in any. I'll put it in my book one day. What do couples look like when they come see me? Unfortunately, they come very, very late in the game. They come when essentially the miscommunication and the feelings of pain and aloneness and loneliness, and it's just agonizing for people. And when they get to that point and they're up against the wall, they absolutely have no capability of doing anything other than breaking up or coming to counseling. And more often than not, obviously, with my statistic, they break up. So when they show up at my doorstep, they are really on the edge of breaking up their relationship. And it's so painful. And that lasts all day long for them. They're at the point where they think about their relationship all day long. It affects their entire life. It affects raising of children. It affects their friendships. And they're just at their wits' end. So I have to actually teach them something that's pretty tricky. It's an entirely new paradigm of how to approach when they feel upset about something. And many people take to it, and I'm really slow and gentle, and it goes in and they get it. And in the first literally 15, 20 minutes of a first session with me, I have them doing that, and they've never seen it before. So their mind gets blown like, oh my God, this is what I've needed to say for 5 years. And I just said it, and Derek pointed it out. And now we're connecting, and they can't believe that is possible.
I would love to. I know the documentary, when I get to finish and watch the full documentary through, of seeing couples go through that continuum. Dr. Pat Allen, who wrote the book Getting to I Do, she used to do this the first Monday monthly in Culver City, where she would host this event, and she would do essentially like rapid coaching where people would sign their name up. They'd come sit on the stool up front. Did you ever go?
No, I've seen things like it, but
yeah. And you would just see people would share what they're struggling with, and she would just laser coach them. And it was fascinating to watch. I would love, Esther Perel does that a little bit in her podcast. I think that it would be amazing to witness you actually doing, I'll even call it this quote unquote surgery. I have two questions. First one is, when a couple comes to see you, so we've learned through studies, there's the famous Harvard study that came out of observing people for over 70 years. And then the results of the survey, or not the survey, the research project, is a 70-year research project, was that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships. And as an individual, we all struggle with these external stimuli in our life: drugs, alcohol, work, workaholism. So there's a lot of things that are components to a healthy life to harmonize: professional life, emotional life, intellectual life, physical life, spiritual life. How do you see that as you're doing this quote unquote surgery? Do you have to address all of those other things, or is essentially the the healing of the relationship, the roots that actually impacts all those other things, or is it vice versa, or more of even a harmony of it all together?
Oh, great question. I have a couple, they're in front of me for the first time, and I watch them for 10 minutes. And in that 10 minutes, I'm building rapport, and I'm listening really well. And they're talking about their in-laws and their money and their house and their cars and their dog and their problematic child. And in these days, their child that's on the spectrum and a little bit autistic. And one partner's mad, the other's overweight. And I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. And I'm just watching, and I'm watching for certain signals, which there are universal signals, thank God. I call these emotional signals. Every couple that comes has a sentence that they could say to the other that would open up everything that I just described, everything you just described. So the immediate answer to your question is, I don't need to know a thing. I don't need to know if they have children. I don't need to know if they're married. I don't need to know hardly any information about them. What I need to do is watch them, and I need to see what the yearning to be close looks like in each of them, because each of us is a little different in what we would like to have. So all of a sudden, I'll be watching the couple go back and forth, and then I'll say, could you slow down for a minute, and would you make eye contact with each other? And I'm flipping a coin right now in my head. So I'll pick the woman, and I'll have the woman say something like, I feel so alone, and you're right in front of me, and I remember how it used to be when we first connected, and I miss that so much. Like, where's the person that was my best friend for the first few years? Like, I'm alone over here. So she says that, and then she starts crying, right? Why does she start crying? Because that's what's held in. That's the deepest thing that's held in all the time by her. And she finally reveals it, which means magically we get to something we need to do over and over and over in our 8 hours. Say what's hurting and be seen about it and understood about it and feel that the other person cares about it. Okay. But then I have the other partner who's listening to her, and he says, but I am here. I'm right here. I'm right in front of you, right? He gets defensive because all he hears from her now is everything he does is wrong, and he feels criticized by her when she just walks in the room. He's bracing for impact the moment he sees her enter the room. So my work is actually to teach him how to let this in. But first, he has to reveal something like, I feel blamed. I feel like I can never get it right with you. All day long, all the time, I'm worried that I'm going to come home and you're going to tell me like the 3 things I did wrong. And that's what I'm waiting for at all times. And I can never get it right. I feel inadequate, and I feel maybe as alone as you do.
This reminds me, so years ago, Feminine Weapon Day, I produced this. Feminine Weapon Day is January 30th. I produce a big event every year to celebrate that. And in 2017 or 18, the theme was For the Love of Men. And we invited women to elect men in their life who support them, uplift them, make them happy. We photographed we photographed all the men, and then we overlaid a quote from the women who elected them to that image. And during that when God gave me that theme that year, literally 2 weeks after the theme came to us, the concert's January 30th, 2 weeks after that theme came to me, what unfolded in the public forum was Me Too and Time's Up. So For the Love of Men had to coexist at the same time, and people definitely struggled with that. I got bullied, I got praised, and I remember, though, that was kind of this awakening for me around in the sharing with men what they did right, or with even human beings beyond just men, women, but what you're doing right. And oftentimes I remember being in some of these photo shoots, and I would share with men that women are sharing all the things that they love about them, and they're like, what do they like about us? We don't even know. Tell us what they like about us. What is it that you and I was going to go into a question around polarities, but what is it that, if you were to share with men, that you are seeing, what do women, from your experience in your sessions, most appreciate or love about men?
Oh, that's really interesting. What do women appreciate about men? Men have, in relationships that come to me, had very little presence to listen to the woman, because the criticizing from the woman starts really, really early in the relationship. So if you have a man that starts off in a relationship and he's excited and he's courting and he's being romantic and he's actually buying flowers on Valentine's Day and he's doing all the things, it's amazing how fast that first moment happens where a woman will just say one thing, just a little critique, and a man usually doesn't have the wherewithal to know how much it really hurt. We skip ourselves. So the man gets a little bit hurt. And all these things she loved about him in the beginning, like, taking care of her, fixing her frickin' printer when it breaks, like doing all the things that a man loves to do. As soon as he starts getting criticized, unfortunately, he doesn't make contact with himself. He skips it, starts building resentment. He doesn't even know he's doing it. And the woman has no idea a year later why flowers aren't happening. So they're in that pattern, and it can go on for years and years and years until it really, really hurts. So what do women love about men? I'll say the thing they love the most. Women want a lot of things, and they have, in some ways, a more complex emotional landscape of the things that make them fulfilled and happy. But a man's are as important, but there are fewer of them, in my opinion. And one of the big ones is he just wants to figure out how to make her happy. Even if they've been fighting and fighting and fighting and going in circles, when I can actually have him admit how much he is sad because he's lost the ability to make her happy, and that's his main thing, like even with years of resentment, if he does something right in the session with me and she likes it and smiles, he's in heaven immediately and he forgets all the resentment. This happens a lot in front of me.
I'm giggling a little because during that production of that event, Feminine Weapon Day, themed in For the Love of Men, I paraded around a theory. I had this theory that man's life purpose is to make women happy, and women are to be wholehearted lovers of men. And that theory sparked a lot of controversy and conversation. And it wasn't that necessarily, because my uncle's gay. He was like, my life purpose is not to make women happy. And I was like, yeah. And I see the way that you treat your mom, my grandma, and what you do for her. So I get it, what you're saying, that there's so much resistance to that. Now, when I share that theory, what is your response?
Oh, wow. I think that in many ways, there's no difference actually with gay men. You nailed it. Like they are going to treat somebody they love that way. But it's easier for most of us to understand the polarity thing with masculine and feminine. So if I looked at two gay men, I would actually say and I'm making this up kinda, but I would say the masculine man is the one who wants to make the feminine man happy. Let's just go from there. But I believe it. Like just when a woman looks back at the man and is smiling and her eyes are open and she's like got those beautiful big eyes that are like, wow, you're the greatest guy ever. That's all we're trying to figure out how to get to. And once he gets criticized, as strong as he is, he cannot overcome it unless they drop into vulnerability and communication skills that will help solve that problem. But he tries. He'll get criticized thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And she's legitimately frustrated. This isn't something to point out that women do to men. Or she's not being received by him either. That's why she's criticizing, right? But when he finally gets seen and understood by her about that, it all opens up. I love it.
So on the topic of polarity, how, Dr. Pat Allen's work is very much in like feminine, masculine. They're two separate entities. There's two separate energies. During the courting process, it's very clear once a couple gets into a relationship, maybe they're switching back and forth at times. Now, we're also in a time period where we, look at balancing the feminine and masculine within inside of each of us. And there's, I guess of sometimes of me of aiming to be on this growth path. Like I always want to strive to be better than I was the day before. And so is then this goal of like balancing the feminine and masculine, is it, and how does that take into account in our relationships? And I'm kind of stacking a lot of questions, so I'm being aware of that. So take what piece of this is resonating with you. And then in your work, I imagine you do work with gay couples as well. Of how is it, like, do you point to the polarity? Do you use polarity in your coaching? And where and how does it show up? And does a gay couple say, I'm more feminine, I'm more masculine? Like, how do you think about this?
Yeah, the big question, polarity. So when I think about the emotional work being the core of a relationship problem, I will name that as a pretty feminine activity. And I don't want to teach men to be more feminine and be in touch with their feelings all the time. I want men to learn how to do that for 3 minutes at a time. So sometimes when couples show up and the man is a bit too feminine, but still he's been criticized. So he's not only feminine all the time, he's actually not sharing his feelings. So it's like a trapped feminine. It's awful. So once he opens up those feelings and reveals some things, the woman often feels safe enough to say and connect with how much she wants a man. She wants a man to be strong and strenuous and protective. And I literally sometimes will take it down to the detail of like talking about like physically how they are together, because you wouldn't believe how many couples don't actually ever talk about kissing. Like they will not like how the other kisses for 20 years, 23 years. No one ever.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No one ever talked about it. No one ever shared it. But then I'll take it to the next step, and I go very, very slowly when I do this, and I'll say this to the woman. Well, remember the man's watching. I'll say, so would you like it if he did something like put his hand behind your head and grabbed your hair, and would you like that? And she just starts smiling. And then and would you like if he squeezed your hair and pulled your hair down into the pillow and made it so you feel like a little trapped, and then started kissing you without asking permission, like you're getting so annoyed that he keeps doing? And she's like lighting up. And then I'm looking at him, and he's like really confused, but really excited. And he's like, I don't have to ask permission. And she's like, I hate that. That's like the worst thing ever. Like, just grab me and take me. So yeah, polarity comes up, but dropping back into vulnerability, not discussing polarity is where the pain is really at. Then they can become playful with it, but they don't know how much they want that and yearn for that.
How about the intersection of vulnerability and emotional attunement? Is there confusion around emotion and vulnerability, or versus vulnerability, or the two together?
Oh, very interesting question. Vulnerability is very much a dropping in to the thing that I am scared about. And as a human interacting in a romantic relationship, believe me, I'm scared about a lot of things, right? So dropping into what I'm feeling and revealing that might be something like I'm really scared to say how painful it is. Like when you leave, I feel like this little part of me that feels like you're gone and I'll never see you again. And I feel kind of abandoned. Like whatever the vulnerable statement is to share. The question is the relationship going slow enough for somebody to share something like I'm really scared right now. I don't know what to do. I'm confused. So when that's shared, emotional attunement kicks in. If the person that shares can pause and slow down and then witness the eyes of the other, and does the other even care at all that I'm risking? Can the other even feel that I'm going deeply within to share something that's hard to share? And the eye contact between the two before the other person even responds, that's emotional attunement. That's I'm sending a signal and it's meaningful. Do you pick it up and perceive it as meaningful in you? And can you see that it's meaningful for me? That's an emotional signal, and that's emotional attunement. And
you mentioned something of you want men to drop into that for 3 minutes a day. Is that more of something, is vulnerability then different? Do you want them to be vulnerable at all times but drop into the emotional component? And I guess at the same time you're being intellectual, like, so using the mind and thinking also can be attached to vulnerability as well.
Yeah. And definitely one of the things I say a lot is there is no template for this. So no, I don't want someone to be vulnerable 3 minutes a day. I want people to know that when they first show up and they're in distress, they have pain going on all the time. So if they're walking on eggshells, I might still have to have them walk on eggshells, just in some better ways, walking on eggshells. So when they get the hang of this and they start learning how to be more open and risk and share with each other, I want them to recognize when they feel uncomfortable in a conversation and they start the most familiar argument that they've had thousands of times, that is the moment to know they are not talking about the topic they think they're talking about. They are talking about their bond being in peril every single time. If they're talking about, like, what do you want for dinner, and they're fighting over, like, Chinese or Italian, which they actually do fight about that, they're fighting about basically, I don't feel loved. I don't either. We got a problem. That's the actual fight, and I want to show them that's when to kick in vulnerability and emotional attunement every time they start arguing.
So you'd mentioned that oftentimes when couples come in, you are looking for, or you see they're yearning for closeness. And we live in a time where many people feel lonely. We live in apartments. Families are, building their careers and their households. Sometimes they live close to their parents and the kids' grandparents, and sometimes they don't. Now, as an individual that is not in a relationship, I feel lonely sometimes too. Is within that, how does that responsibility, because is the goal to not feel lonely? Is it possible to not feel lonely right now? And is it sometimes the pressure for this one person to fulfill this hole that we're feeling in loneliness? Is the goal to strive? And you and I have talked a little bit about polyamory, and I think you and I align on our own makeup tends to be more a monogamous makeup. But how does that, so is my goal as a single person to get into a relationship with somebody, because once I get into the relationship with somebody, I won't be lonely, and that'll heal my loneliness. Or, this couple, they're in the relationship together and one's feeling lonely, and so their partner is right there beside them. So that partner needs to fulfill their loneliness so they don't feel the loneliness anymore.
Yeah. The goal is to never try to make yourself feel something different from what you're really feeling. So what really happens in the scenario you're describing now, if if you personally are feeling alone and lonely, well, everyone in a relationship also feels alone and lonely, right? So the actual goal is, first of all, if you want to have that kind of connection, there's actually nothing that can reproduce actually being in a relationship and having that kind of ongoing commitment with each other. I think that's one of the best parts of life, right? So let's say you get into a relationship, you will be activated and feel lonely. And you know when that happens? When you start getting controlling with each other. When you start arguing and you start controlling. Actually, what's happening is it's like love brings up everything unlike itself. Because you actually do have this new connection and your needs are actually coming to the forefront, many feelings will come up. And that's where we get really in trouble. Like, I just met this person and I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that I'm feeling alone and I miss them already. I've known them for 8 days, right? That's too fast, right? Well, those are the little risks that make people fulfilled, because we're just desperate for depth and being close and feeling each other. So that's when a couple is absolutely brilliant, when they show up early in a relationship and they say, we've started arguing already. And we don't know why. And the reason why is those feelings are still there, and we need to know what to do with them. And it's the sharing of those feelings and knowing how to do that so the other gets what we're transmitting and we feel that they get it. And when that goes in both directions, that is where loneliness can go away for real.
Now, Derek, I know that you have to run to the airport because we're ending now RelateFest. I have other questions for you and other topics to discuss, but we're going to put a hold on them so you don't miss your flight. Any final words that you'd like to share, inclusive of where our listeners can find you?
Yeah, you can find me at understandeachother.com. understandeachother.com, and I have a video on there I just made, and you can sign up for right now a free intro video call as a couple. Please do this if you're a couple and you want some help, and in the first half hour you'll see kind of what I'm talking about today. It'll be very powerful for you. If you are feeling frustration or pain or loneliness or not understood, and you're holding that in separate from your partner and they don't know that that's happening inside of you, that's a ticking time bomb, and that grows and grows and grows, and it never goes away. So anything you're feeling that's uncomfortable, the point isn't you're going to get rid of that thing being uncomfortable. If you don't feel understood by your partner and by yourself that it is uncomfortable, that's the healing of relationship. Only then can you actually have access to your brain power again as a couple to do what you're supposed to do, which is solve problems. So couples come to me and they can't solve their problems when they don't realize they're actually fighting about their bond all the time. We need to make their bond secure so that they can solve their own problems.
Thank you, Derek, for the work that you're doing with the world. And I imagine that many people listening are going to reach out to you as well. So when you do, mention that you heard Derek Hart on this podcast, Deepen with Christina. And Derek and I are speaking about working together on a bigger, larger scale where more people will get to access his work in an event forum, and that gives you the ability to connect with other couples, connect with other humans, deepen with your partner, and feel a supportive community as you're doing that work together. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Deepen with Christina. If you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe, like, share it with a friend, specifically this episode. If you think this episode resonates with a couple friends of yours or even a single friend of yours, please do send it off to them. And check out that calendar, wedeepen.com/calendar, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.